Okay, so it is being recorded, and after the webinar, we will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who registered. So if you do need to step out or step away from today's webinar, you will get access to it later. We apologize for the delay in sending out last week's webinar. There was a few absences this week from our office, but if you haven't gotten that already, you should get a copy of the presentation as well as a link to last week's webinar. A few housekeeping items. We would ask that you leave questions to the end if possible, although we will try to keep an eye on it during the presentation. There is a Q&A function at the bottom that you can use. That might be the easiest thing to use. If you do need to be unmuted to ask a question, please let us know. And we also would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. I would like to introduce our facilitators today. If you weren't with us last week, we will start by introducing Jennifer Askey. So Jennifer works with leaders and leaders-to-be in a very down-to-earth and engaging approach that utilizes emotional intelligence, positive psychology, and mindfulness to help her clients navigate the internal and external obstacles of their professional worlds. Jennifer brings over 20 years of experience working in complex academic organizations as both a faculty member and administrator to her coaching work, where she focuses on career planning and transition, as well as organizational effectiveness. She utilizes assessments such as DISC, EQI 2.0, Belbin team roles, and the 360s to help her clients and their organizations gain new insights and develop forward-looking plans for change. She's an engaging and enthusiastic public speaker and workshop facilitator. She leads workshops on emotional intelligence and team effectiveness in Alberta and virtually. She holds a PhD in German literature and is a certified professional coactive coach with CTI and a professional certified coach through ICF. She is pursuing certifications with Positive Intelligence and the International Mindfulness Teachers Association. Locally, Jennifer serves on the board of the Edmonton chapter of the International Coach Federation and the Unitarian Church of Edmonton. And our other facilitator today is Sherry Lovely. Sherry is the owner and operator of Fireweed Coaching and Consulting. Sherry's values as a professional development coach have been developed with 25 years related experience with senior government officials with the Government of the Northwest Territories in Yellowknife. She holds a BA in Social and Cultural Anthropology from the University of Calgary with an honors study in archaeological impacts of the cultural and well-being of the Dene communities and their land along the proposed Mackenzie Gas project. Over the past few years, Sherry has enhanced her facilitation and coaching experiences to pursue her passion in developing others. She is certified in the delivery of EQI 2.0 and EQ 360, Myers-Briggs personality test, and is currently working towards her dialectic behavior therapy credentials and online facilitation certification. This fall, Sherry will also have completed her trauma-informed coaching certification. After having spent more than half her life in the Northwest, or in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, Sherry, her husband, and her 2 teenagers relocated to Edmonton in 2018. And I did forget to mention that this series is sponsored by Merck Frost. There is one more webinar in this series next week on the topic of gardening, if you'd like to join us. And thank you. I'll pass it off to Sherry.
Thanks, Sydney. Gardening, that sounds fantastic at this time of year. Hello, everybody. And thank you for joining us and welcome back. If you were here last week, we're really excited to have you. So today, we're going to spend our time a little bit differently from last time. As Sydney had mentioned, we're really excited to give you some additions to your toolbox in terms of awareness and management. So we'll start off by recapping the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, the mind, body, heart approach. We'll talk about awareness tools for EQ. Actually, Jennifer will speak to the awareness tools for EQ. And when she's done, I will talk about management tools for the emotional intelligence. But we'll start with a recap. What is emotional intelligence? So if you weren't here last week, and even if you were, this would serve as a reminder. So what is emotional intelligence? This is the ability to perceive emotions, access and generate emotions to assist thought, understand emotions and emotional knowledge, the ability to reflectively regulate emotions and promote emotional and intellectual growth. So the way that we presented last week and the way that we'll continue to present this week is we'll look at self-recognition, self-management, social recognition, and social management. Jennifer will take the lead on self-awareness and social awareness, and give us some tips, where I'll take the lead on self-management and social relationship management, and we'll provide some tips for that. Before I pass the baton along, I just wanted to bring this slide back to our attention. We used this last week and a lot of people gave us some positive response on it. So I'm just going to let it sit there for a second. Take a look at it. Identifying emotions, it can be difficult for people. This name it to tame it can be a challenge. We go through so many emotions in any part of our day. To stop and think about what we're feeling, it can be a challenge for some. So we put this this emotion wheel up to give a little bit of prompts to understand maybe some of the things that we're feeling. Because this is a webinar on tools, we're going to be doing a few exercises and activities. So hopefully we'll have a chance to draw on this one again. And now I'm passing over to Jennifer to talk about some awareness.
Okay, and I will unmute because of course, when you start a webinar, the first thing that happens is that your dog decides to behave really badly. So if you could see me there at the beginning trying to shoo her, yeah, we'll see. So apologies if she continues to behave really badly. Okay, so last week when we were introducing emotional intelligence, one of the things that came up was using your emotional intelligence to make resonant choices. That was the terminology. And the notion of resonant choices brings up two things that I want to put at the outset of our discussion about tools for EQ. And first is the notion of resonance, and the second is the notion of mindfulness. So resonance, making resonant choices, means making choices or resonant decisions. Making decisions and choosing actions that resonate with you based on your values, your ethics, and your goals, right? So your inner compass, your inner North Star. And what I have discovered as a coach is that most people have sort of a sense of what's important to them, but very few of us have taken explicit time with ourselves to say, what are my values? What are the things I can't live without? What are the things that rub my fur the wrong way, and justifiably so? So that emotional self-awareness involves knowing what resonates with you and why, right? And so one of the tools that we're going to talk about today in a couple different ways is mindfulness. And mindfulness is, it is not, you can stay on the pretty slide for a minute, Sherry, thanks. Mindfulness is, you don't have to be on a bench, a meditation bench in a room with chimes chanting Om. It really simply is bringing your mind and your heart, as you see on this slide, and your body into the same place and the same time, right? So when you sit or walk or listen or play piano or do whatever you're doing, is your mind and your heart and your body, are they all aligned in the moment? So doing any activity, whether it's sitting and breathing or playing the piano or walking, that brings your mind and your body and your heart into the same place and the same time with intention, right? If you've ever done a yoga practice or a meditation practice and they ask you to set your intention at the outset, that's the deal. It's activating your heart and your mind and your body and directing it towards things that you value. So that's sort of the meta and also mega practice for building awareness. Okay, now we can move on to the next slide, which is an overview of 2 of the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. And we'll recap the slides that we showed last week as well. But self-awareness and social awareness are what we're going to talk about, because there's awareness of self, and then there's the, reading the room in sort of that mid-sized social awareness. It's interpersonal social awareness, and then it's situational awareness on sort of a larger scale. But for the individual, there's the connection of cause and effect. Like, if I do this, if I experience this, what is the result in me? What is the emotional result in me when I experience this, when somebody says this, when I engage in this activity? Self-awareness also involves assertiveness and sense of self. Like, do I know what I believe in, and can I stand up for it? Have I accepted who I am? Am I confident in who I am? So you can see that these are not checklist items, right? You can't say, okay, I need to develop acceptance of myself and confidence in myself today. It's a Thursday, it's about 12:12. I'll get that done by 12:35, right? Like, you can't check it off a list. So building awareness involves different kinds of practices. On the social awareness side, empathy, appreciation, compassion, benevolence, these are big concepts. And again, like developing empathy, that's a lifetime project. That's not a Thursday afternoon project. But these sorts of awareness things, they're very inward looking first, so that you can then see that reflected outwardly. So if we want to look at the next 2 slides, these are just recapping what we went over last week. So self-awareness, sometimes called self-recognition, intrapersonal communication. So what is my internal narrative? How aware am I of what's going on inside of me? And then social awareness is being attuned to what is potentially going on inside other people, right? To recognize that, to empathize with it, and to respond to it in ways that are going to land well. So that's our recap of self-awareness and social awareness. Now let's get to the tools. And there are 3 that I'm going to suggest. I've already spoken a bit to mindfulness. So I've connected it to your values, your sense of purpose, your intention, right? So mindfulness is a big one, because what happens when you practice mindfulness is, because the whole point is that you're not supposed to follow trains of thought. You're not supposed to have a blank slate. We don't ever get empty in our heads, but you're not supposed to like take that thought that occurs to you and then obsessively follow it where it goes. You're supposed to say, oh yes, that's an interesting thought, and then let it leave. What happens in mindfulness is that you learn to notice, oh, what does my mind do when it's left to its own devices? What is my default, right? And so that is a powerful tool for building self-awareness. What are my default mental patterns? Like my default mental pattern, my primary one is planning. Left to my own devices, my brain spins out future scenarios to anticipate or plan for. Other people's default script might be going back in time and listing all of their regrets or all of the bad things that have ever happened to them, right? So we all have default patterns. Recognizing those is something that being quiet lets us do, okay? Reflection is another really powerful tool for building self-awareness. And this is also, here we are at the School of Continuing Education at MacEwan, reflection is the key method for adults to learn. So when you're a kid, you're a sponge, and there's a lot of learning through mimicry when you're small. And then as you move into teenage years, your mimicry learning decreases and other kinds of learning styles increase. And by the time you're an adult, where you kind of want to understand how the sausage is made, as we say, the way to learn is you might get something explained to you, shown to you. You can be a visual or kinesthetic or textual learner, whatever, but the way it sits is to take that and reflect on it. So whether that reflection happens verbally or in writing, or just in your mind during a long walk, that work of saying, okay, I've learned this thing, how does it now apply? How does this show up in my life? Oh, can I connect what I've just seen to what I learned? And doing that intentionally. That is adult learning 101. It's the foundation of adult learning, and it is a great tool for developing your self-awareness. And the last tool I'll talk about is checking in with yourself and with others. So the first thing, go to the, all right, the first thing we're going to do for about 2 minutes and 50 seconds is we're going to watch. Sherry's going to share her sound and her video with us. We're going to watch a mindfulness exercise that does what I was talking about, which is body, mind, heart, all in the same space. And you're going to participate.
Mindfulness mini exercise, which really gets us thinking about this idea of paying attention. And this is borrowed from the fabulous Richard Burnett. I don't know if anyone here knows Richard, but he is one of the people behind the Mindfulness in Schools project, which is a fabulous initiative if you're interested in mindfulness and young people. So I'd like you to join me in this little exercise. So what we're going to do, we're going to start by, I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, and then we're all going to clap together. 1, 2, 3, clapping as loud as you can. And then you're going to place your arms about so far apart, as if you're holding a football or something like that. So I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, then we're going to clap together. 1, 2, 3, and then hold our hands apart. Everyone got that basic idea? Okay, let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Okay, without now necessarily looking at your hands, just place your attention into your hands and notice what you sense. Maybe they're tingling. Maybe your hands feel hot or cold. Just notice how they feel. Okay, now let's sort of play with our attention a little bit. Now try to zoom your attention in specifically to your thumbs. Notice how your thumbs feel. And now let's try even more precisely. Zoom your attention into the very top of your left little finger. See if you can just notice specifically what's happening with the left little finger. Okay, now just let your hands relax back onto your lap or wherever they feel comfortable. And then keeping your gaze softened, or if you like, even potentially closing your eyes if you feel relaxed doing that. Let's just now bring our attention to something else that we do thousands of times every day, but often are not very conscious of, which is breathing. So just take a moment to take a few, perhaps slightly deeper than normal, relaxing breaths in and out. And as you're breathing, just try to notice that act of breathing, this thing that we do so subconsciously, and yet is so at the heart of our lives. Notice the air coming into your lungs, coming out again as you breathe out. Notice how your chest expands as you breathe in, and then goes in again as you breathe out. And you'll probably find that your mind, if it hasn't already, will soon start to wander off onto other things rather than your breath, and that's absolutely fine. That's what minds do. all the time. But just when you notice you've drifted off to something else, just try to bring your mind back to what we're focusing on. So back to your breath. Just notice how you feel to breathe. Okay, now keeping with this idea of attention. So we've had our attention in our hands, we've had our attention in our breathing. Now bring your attention to your body more generally. Notice how it feels to be sitting down in the chair. Notice the contact your feet are making with the floor. And just perhaps notice how your body's feeling generally. You don't need to change anything, you don't need to move how you're sitting. But just notice if there's any tension, anything that feels hot or cold. Just tune into what's going on in your body right now. And then finally, let's turn our attention to perhaps what you might call the weather pattern inside ourselves. How are you feeling inside right now? You may have had a long, busy day. You may have lots on your mind. Again, don't try to change anything. Just notice how you're feeling right now. What's the weather pattern like inside you? And then just to end this little introductory exercise, let's just bring our attention back to our breath and take a few more just gentle, relaxing breaths in and out. Okay, and then let's bring our gaze back into the room. Let's bring ourselves back into noticing what's around us. So a very simple exercise, a mindfulness exercise if you like, but also just a chance to notice this faculty we have of attention. And so often we are living in this mode of thinking and analysing and rushing and doing the next thing. And actually very often we're not necessarily in that mode of just tuning in, whether it's tuning into our physical sensations, to what's going on around us, or indeed to what's going on inside us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sherry, for that. So he closed by bringing up attention, and you can see that what we're talking about here is awareness. And I'll just invite you to reflect a bit on what was going on inside your mind while we were doing that for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Were you impatient? Were you thinking about your grocery list? Were you judging the exercise? Were you irritated by his accent? Were you itching your nose, right? Just being aware of, were you really in that moment, or were you impatient? Or those are all steps towards self-awareness. And I'm going to move right into the next exercise without spending a lot more time with mindfulness, because it's specifically about reflection and this self-reflexivity that aids adult learning and aids self-awareness. And as you know, I teach EQ a lot, right? Sydney introduced me that way. And Sherry and I have been really delving into all of our varied resources to pull out tools. And almost every tool for building awareness, self-awareness and social awareness, involves taking time to write things down. And I find this interesting, right? Because we also acknowledge that there are kinesthetic learners and visual learners and all of that. But the act of writing really does cement things in our minds and bodies in ways that just verbalizing something or thinking about it doesn't. So here I offer you some journaling suggestions. So if you are interested in really boosting your EQ and in bringing that emotional intelligence into your daily practice in a more conscious way, these are some journaling exercises that can help. So if you set aside a time at the end of the day to reflect in writing, questions like this, like what were the highest or most intense emotions I felt during the day, right? Happiest moments, the lowest moments, like what were my intense emotions? And then when you've answered that question, like I was really angry or I was super excited, then what did that feel like? How did I know? What was my body doing? What was my mind doing? What values that I have was I able to express, or what values do I have were in conflict with what was happening? And so tell yourself that story of the really high or really low emotion during the day and write it out for yourself. So that's one type of reflection exercise. And on the social awareness side, there's the how was I responding to other people? How did other people respond to me? What were my interpersonal communications like? How did that interaction with so-and-so feel? I think this is a really interesting exercise to think about doing as we look to July, maybe, and opening up and going out in public. I have a friend in the States who's fully vaccinated and is traveling to visit people in a different state who are also fully vaccinated. And they're thinking about like going to a parade. She's like, I don't know if I know how to people anymore. And so, right, paying attention to, oh, how am I responding to people? How are people responding to me? And then taking time to write that down. Like, oh, wow, I was out in a crowd watching a soccer game and I felt really uncomfortable. Is that, what am I afraid of? Is this residual COVID fear? What does that mean? And just bringing that into your attention, right? And so this is awareness. We're not to management yet. So this is bringing all of those things to the surface where you can pay attention to them. And then the last exercise for awareness building is different kinds of checking in. So we have our internal dialogue, we're bringing things to our awareness, we're paying attention maybe to the internal discourse in our mind. And then it's a good habit to just check in with others. Like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are you experiencing what I'm experiencing? So the way to do that for self is you can create a goal, a plan, a vision, and then pay attention to your emotional experiences as you work towards that goal. So you'll see in the earlier slides, there's, cause and effect or consequences or commitment, things like that. Your ability to say, okay, here's a goal, it's reasonable. And in achieving it, am I going to have to grow a lot? And what happens when I hit frustrations, right? All of those are ways to build your self-awareness. Like, when do I get excited? When do I lose interest? What motivates me? What demotivates me? Right. So in the process of achieving a goal, what do you notice about your emotional landscape? That's one way to check in with self. Checking in with others, you can do around feedback. And there's a great book, and I'll put it in the chat when I'm done talking, called Thanks for the Feedback. Kind of a snarky title, but it's a really, really good book by a professor at the Harvard School of Business, whose name escapes me. But she has done amazing work on what it is, on best practices around both giving and receiving feedback. And when people offer you feedback, especially, what's it called? Constructive feedback, right? We all know constructive feedback. And oftentimes our first response is, well, yeah, but. And so instead of yeah, butting, receive without defensiveness. Thank you for the feedback. And you can be boiling mad on the inside or super up in your feels. But if you can accept it without defensiveness and then spend some time with yourself, okay, what was that like? Right? What am I experiencing here and why? If I'm defensive, what's behind that? Right? That's social awareness building. And then the flip side of that coin is when giving feedback, can you give it without judgment? Right? Like, hey, when you ran that workshop last week, you forgot to include X. Can you make sure to include it this week? Oh, thank you for the feedback. I didn't realize that. Absolutely. Right. And so the person isn't saying, what a moron, you forgot slide 12. Saying, you forgot that last week. Why don't you make sure that it's in there for this week? So there's no judgment attached to that. Right. Another component of social awareness is your ability to develop and mentor people. So how might you give feedback as a growth opportunity? Like, hey, you and I both care about your career. Can I offer you some insight on X? Right? So it's not done in judgment, it's done from a different, more generous perspective. And then reflect, like, how did that work? If I come from that generous perspective, does somebody take it in a generous way, for example? So checking in with your assumptions and then reflecting, okay, were my assumptions correct? How did that go? Right? So this is all incremental work, and it's very inward, right? It's very much what's going on with me, checking it against reality, reflecting it back, being mindful, right? Not getting caught up in internal narratives, but actually being aware of your own emotional weather pattern, as the guy in the video said, and the weather patterns in the room. Wow, I feel like I really rushed through all of that, but we have all these good tools, and I want to get to the management piece with Sherry, but yeah, those are the highlights for self-awareness and social awareness. And now I'll turn it back over to Sherry.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's so hard not to feel rushed because there's so much stuff that we want to share with you guys and so little time. So that was great. I hope you all appreciated that as much as I did in terms of awareness, because without awareness, you can't manage. So as we know, Jennifer talked about self-awareness and social awareness, and I'm going to take the reins now and talk about self-management and social management in terms of relationship management. I'm going to flip to last week's slides just for familiarity. So here, when we're talking about self-management, just to recap, we're talking about that self-control and that discipline over your emotions. It's okay to feel the feels, but we have to have some kind of socially acceptable discipline over the way that we express those emotions. Being goal-directed in terms of performance and targeted action is another way to manage those emotions and ourselves. And Jennifer had talked about that as well, that goal setting in terms of one of the tools, being aware of what that goal is and the emotions that are preventing you from succeeding, or the ones that are driving you to success. Those are key in order to implement any type of, to accomplish any of those goals. Integrity and trustworthy, they're crucial to self-management and relationship building. Motivation, positive psychology, and initiative. Jennifer had talked about positive intelligence. She may not have framed those words, I don't recall, but I've worked with Jennifer long enough to know that positive intelligence is very much a part of that awareness and the management as well. She may be onto something if she coins the EQ and positive intention as her own package, just saying, because they're amazingly complementary. So then in order to have the self-management, you'll have creativity and agility and flexibility to be adaptable, right? Without being able to flex into other people's needs and expectations, we then become too rigid, and it's really hard to manage ourselves in environments when we get to that, or if we get to that. And we all do, right? We all get to that point at some point or another. We're very believe in something, and it's good to believe in something and stand by your convictions, but in order for self-management and good relationship building, it's good to be in tune with your emotional intelligence. And I don't mean to just throw coined terms around, but what I mean when we talk about emotional intelligence is knowing that it's okay to give on some of that rigidity. It's okay to be flexible. Okay, what else have we got here? Self-management measures self-evaluation coupled with self-regulation to control and harness feelings that impact the ability to achieve personal objectives. So Jennifer had talked a little bit about that as well in her tools, that ability to know, again, what's preventing us to get there, to control those feelings, feel the feels, understand what we're going through in order to harness that. And as I say to my kids, it's okay to have these feelings, but I need you to use them for good, not evil. And that may look like whatever it needs to look like at the time. So relationship management, this one here is key. This is the one that pulls all three of the realms together. So last week we went into a little bit more detail than we are this week in terms of our social or into the realms here that we see. But again, I just want to remind everybody that they're very interconnected. You really can't have one without the other. But why? Why are we doing this? We want to be able to have good relationships with others, but also we want to have a good relationship with ourselves. So this is the key realm or component that taps into all of these realms that we've discussed: the self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness. This is our ability to use the awareness that Jennifer talked about of our own emotions and those of others to manage interaction effectively. So we talked about this term read the room last week. This is very much a part of this composite, this relationship management. It's being able to identify what other people are feeling. If you walk into a room, for example, and someone is really angry, this may not be internally, your emotional intelligence flag may tell you this is not a time to be sarcastic. Unless you know that person, and it's my husband, and it's usually what diffuses things. But you need to really know someone to do that. You need to read the room. If you're walking into your boss and he's angry and it's because you've done something, sarcasm might not be the time or place. So it's understanding, it's being aware of how you're feeling and how the other person or the room is feeling. So a person in a well-balanced, who has a good emotional balance in terms of relationship management, is generally the person who has an open door policy. People tend to walk in, feel comfortable sharing experience or expressing their thoughts. These people are patient, empathetic, and are very good at being non-judgmental. And these give other people the benefit of the doubt. So folks with a low skill in this area, this is, a little bit of what Jennifer was saying. What do others think of me? What might others say of me? So a person who does not have very well balanced, and again, we don't like to use high-low scores when we're talking about emotional intelligence. It's all about balance and finding that sweet spot of understanding what we are about, how we're feeling, and how to apply those to the outside world. But a person with less balanced skills in the emotional management or the relationship management might be considered a bit of an oversharer. This person might talk about things that maybe aren't socially acceptable to talk about, unless you know someone quite well. This person may give you the 300-word version of a 2-word answer, right? But again, it's got a lot of emotion. It's packed with things that maybe don't necessarily need to be shared. And they're reactive to people rather than responsive. So what I mean by that is if somebody comes in, I work with a lot of self-regulation, regulating teens, tweens. And if you come in up here and you are angry, your body language will tell you that. From all those awareness things that Jennifer talked about, your body might tighten up. You might have a facial expression that's really terse, very unwelcoming. And if you're here and someone comes to you, they'll automatically meet you here. And that's what I mean by reactive. You're reacting as this person to what you're coming up into. To be responsive is to perhaps say, okay, this person is angry, they're a little bit dysregulated. I'm going to figure out how I can bring them down and meet them halfway. And ways to do that would be to maybe maintain some eye contact. I'm not going to go into those skills quite yet. What I really wanted to do is drive home the fact of what we're talking about when we're talking about relationship management, and taking those awareness skills and putting that into place here when we talk about the management. I'm going to jump to one over to here. I meant to put this one ahead of this one. So be an observer of yourself. This one ties together to what Jennifer was saying. Pay attention to what you feel and how those feelings contribute, distract, enhance, or challenge you. This is a quote from Buddha, no less. And I just thought it was a good way to tie together the awareness and the management parts. But we'll go back to management tools. So this one here that I'm going to talk to you about is self-awareness, self-management and relationship management. And this one is a DBT skill. So this is dialectical behavior therapy, which I'm not going to get into, but it's also one of those nice things that complement EQ. And it will help you get some balance and regulate. It's all about self-regulating. Just as a quick, what is dialectical behavior theory? It's finding the balance, much like between two dichotomies. And much like emotional intelligence, we don't want to talk in the highs and lows. We want to talk about the balance. So the DBT are the skills. Those are those practical applications to be able to manage ourselves and others. So this is a nice one, I thought. It's the give skills. So this is being gentle with yourself and others, acting interested, listening and acting interested. Don't don't interrupt, maintain good eye contact, and be non-judgmental as best you can. Validate. So Jennifer and I were having a quick discussion about this earlier this morning. This really is, I consider, the key to the world for emotional and relationship success. Validating. It can generally, if you get practicing at this, and it's hard, it's very easy to talk about and it's easy. I'm going to give you some skills, but don't kid yourself. It's not easy until you practice, because a lot of the times we can come across as condescending. I have two kids. One, Mom, you don't validate me enough. My older child, don't pull that with me. So yeah, you need to read the room and know who you're talking to when you use this skill. But validating is showing that you understand. It's meeting this person where they're at. If they're here, I understand what you're going through. I hear you. I feel you. It's letting this person feel that they've been heard. I realize this is hard for you. I see you are busy, and are some of the prompts that you might use. Again, it's really hard. It can be tricky to not be condescending. I hear what you're going through. Mom, go away, would say my son. And my daughter, yes, she would pick up on that. Yes, Mom, thank you for understanding. And we'd have a conversation around it. This one I love, and it's funny, the more I read about it and the more I tried to understand it so that I could present it today, the more I realized that I kind of do this, and it really, it's a simple thing, but it really helps. Use an easy manner. So what does this mean? This means smile, laugh or smile. When you laugh and smile, your face sends a signal to your brain about its emotional state. So even walking around the world with a half smile, first of all, I think I started this when there was something on the internet, on the social media that said, smile, let the world wonder what you're up to. And it became a habit, and it truly does generate that chemistry to your brain that you are generally a happy person. It doesn't mean that you can smile away trauma. It doesn't mean that you can smile away drama or other really important things. But, you know, in the middle of it all, when you're taking a moment to be mindful and do the things that Jennifer was talking about, put a half smile on your face. And this is really good for self-management. So when you're stuck in a distressing or a negative thought, forcing you to smile counteracts that negative emotional state. So give that a try. I see we're running out of time here. We want to give some time for Q&A, but what I had planned on my next slide was to practice self-validation. So I will take the time, I'll take a minute or two just to really go through this, because I think it's important. Again, this is your ticket to victory. Acknowledge what you feel. Right? So what does that mean? The first step to acknowledging your emotion is experiencing it. You know what? I'm going to put this up while I talk about this here. So name it to tame it. Acknowledge the emotion that you're experiencing without judging it. Put a name on whatever it is. If you feel sad, then just repeat the sentence to yourself without getting lost in that deprecating thought. Instead of saying to yourself, I am always feeling sad, I feel so weak and unworthy of anything because I can never pick myself up, simply acknowledge the fact that the emotion is, I feel sad. right? So we don't get caught up in that whole cycle of what being sad is doing to you. You are simply feeling sad. Own it, let it go. Allow it. This step focuses on reminding ourselves that it's okay to experience the emotion. You're allowed to feel whatever it is that you feel right now. Some of the statements that you might think of using to allow yourself to be in the emotion that you're in is, it's okay to feel the way I feel right now. I'm allowed to experience this emotion. I mean, I hope that this has been something people have been able to use through COVID, where it's been such an interesting and different time in our lives. It's okay to languish. Remember, we talked about Adam Grant's languishing. It's that in between place of flourishing and being under the covers totally depressed. And a lot of people in the world are in that languishing place. It's okay. Be languishing, right? The world isn't what we're used to. You're allowed to experience this emotion. You're allowed to feel this way. It doesn't mean that you behave this way. This will pass, but now the emotion is here. This emotion is uncomfortable, but it won't hurt you, right? So we tell ourselves, this is an emotion that is uncomfortable, but it won't hurt me. And understanding. Think about why you may be feeling this way right now. And again, maybe these are the things that are COVID. Whoops, sorry, wrong screen. The last step is meant to create a context for emotion that you are feeling. Many of us don't always stop and try to understand why we are feeling what we feel. This is the step to take your time to think about past events that have led you to this particular emotion. Don't judge yourself. Just think about the objective facts. Say to yourself, it's no surprise that I felt so angry, since I always think people will abandon me if they don't return my call. Instead of, I was being stupid and that created a feeling of my anger, right? Own the emotion and understand why it's there. We don't have enough time to really get into more of how to do this, but if I can leave you with one thing, it goes both ways for all of these things. Self-validating and validating others. We will be talking about that in another session, which we'll leave for now. But these are key. These are things that I believe are key, and I'd be happy to go on for days, but my time is up. So I will now pass the floor back to Jennifer. Actually, we're both going to open the floor, pardon me. We will open the floor for both of us now for questions. And I see that we have a Q&A box going, but if we could use the chat box, that would be a little bit easier. And the reason for that is once the Q&A, once they're answered, they disappear. And last week I realized that we didn't really answer some questions very well, but they were gone, so we couldn't go back to them. In the chat, we have a chance to go back and forth on a few things. So I open it up and I really appreciate your time. Thank you all, and we're happy to answer questions. Jennifer, you're on mute, my friend.
Okay, I'm going to answer one of the questions from the Q&A, since I just went and found it, which is, if you're a highly sensitive person and you're trying to self-manage and there's somebody in your environment who's not doing that at all, how do you do it? Well, again, no magic button, but here's best practices. So when you're triggered, when you're all up in your feels, when you're having a negative emotional reaction, it does have a ripple effect. And so that person's negative reaction is totally going to ripple into you. We have mirror neurons. Your brain works that way. It is inviting you to go into your own negative reaction. So through self-awareness and self-management, through mindfulness, through things like DBT, you can slow yourself down, take a pause for a minute mentally, and instead of being automatically triggered, I'm following a neural pathway here with my finger, instead of being automatically triggered into your own negative reaction, you can ground yourself in your body for a minute, whether that's, touching something, listening to something, looking into this person's eyes really keenly, and then remind yourself that you have a choice. And your choices can be things like empathy, curiosity, generosity, innovation, your purpose and values, right? All of those things that propel us and motivate us in a positive way can be the path that you take. And if somebody is having a really negative response and you respond with your negative response, like you are aware that that just brings into being this spiral. So if somebody's having a negative emotional response and you respond with empathy, you respond with curiosity, and that empathy can be for yourself, right? That doesn't mean you make yourself emotionally completely available, right? It can just be, oh, yeah, I can see that that's really hard for you. It's hard for me right now too. I'm going to have to take a minute, right? And exercise that empathy for yourself and invite them to do the same thing. So we can't change people, but in managing ourselves, we can potentially show the people in our environment a pathway for them to manage themselves, right? So it really very much is being able to take that pause through mindfulness, through a mantra, through checking in with yourself, through checking in with your body, and choosing a response that is more in line with curiosity, generosity, creativity, and empathy, rather than the negative stuff. So I hope that helps.
A great answer, Jennifer. I'm just going to add one thing, just because I often find myself in that position, balance managing boundaries and responsibilities as a sensitive person in the company of others who are reacting. So 2 of my family members tend to meet up here constantly. Myself and one of my children, we come together quietly. We talk under the drama. And so just that little change in tone, it helps us to stay grounded, to be present, but it also helps to kind of set the tone in the room. I mean, my family members are on to me and completely ignore us. But if you do this with somebody who's not used to it, they'll tend to come right down too. So all of the things that Jennifer said, but then just in that, the most practical way is to keep your voice, be gentle, right? Remember that give, be gentle. I'm going to take one of the questions here to the chat room. I have to go back to it because I love that everybody's chatting so quickly. We had a question. I saw something about a meltdown. Can EQ help us from others and having a meltdown? Absolutely, 100%. So this was really to just draw on what Jennifer had said. When we validate others and understand what they're feeling, through understanding and feeling what we are feeling, we can absolutely deregulate people. Going back to this, give, be gentle, interested, validate, and easy, right? Hear this validated part. First of all, be interested. Go in, be interested in what they're saying. Listen for what they're feeling. It goes to that empathy video that we saw last week from Brene Brown as well. To know what the feeling is and empathize with that. If we can say, I understand that you're upset right now. What can I do to help you? That will generally bring that meltdown to a crashing halt because they don't know what to say, right? They're in your face, they're screaming at you probably. They expect you to go back the same way. And when you can say, I get what you're feeling, it's okay. How can I help? That will generally shut it right down. There was another one here. Olga, thank you. Yes, the biggest resource we used last week was Daniel Goldman. That was the 4 quadrants that we've been talking about. That's based on Daniel Goldman. And so I did do a bit of a Google search on him today to find some resources. And if you Google Daniel Goldman EQ coaching, you'll get a plethora of resources. And that's primarily what we've been using. Today's will be a little bit different because we're drawing on each of our specialties outside of EQ. And I'm going to pass this back over to you, Jennifer, but I just want to take Arthur's question about EQ and hostile people. Same as Jennifer's response to Victoria, as well as our response about meltdowns. So hostile people, yes, if you can meet them, they're going to be here. If you can understand where they're at, you can bring them back down by being gentle, validating, interested in what they're saying. And this whole having an easy manner, if you can, that's more afterwards. But in the moment, validate, understand. You'll sometimes have to put everything that you're feeling, because when you see someone that's hostile, right away, our natural reaction is to go here. But if we can keep ourselves calm and grounded by having all those awareness skills that Jennifer talked about, then we can say to them, it's okay. I understand you're angry. And that, again, will generally bring people right down again. Sorry, Jennifer, go ahead if you want to take on one of the questions.
No, I've trying to been speaking the English. No, I'm trying to respond to things in the chat. So I put in the chat links for informal assessments of emotional intelligence. Olga, since you and I have connected on LinkedIn, reach out to me there, and I'll get you the particular references you're looking for, because I don't think I have them super quickly to hand. But yeah, I'll get those to you. Let's see here. Have you ever, okay, Faye asks, have you ever experienced professionals communicating their emotions as a way to connect and resolve conflict? Yes, I have, and not as often as I maybe would have liked. I find that especially if the emotions are connotated negatively, like I am disappointed, I am sad, I am frustrated, that people tend not to want to share those. And I'm not sure that's always the best leadership strategy. As Sydney said, I'm offering in the fall, I think, again, as part of the leadership certificate at MacEwan, a course specifically on EQ for leaders. And there's lots of really good information there. A book that I can recommend that tells a lot of stories about that, putting it in the chat. It's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. She comes from the tech sector in the US, has worked at Google and Twitter and places like that, but talks a lot about leadership and emotional intelligence. I'm not sure she uses the words emotional intelligence, but Radical Candor very much falls into that framework. I would like, before we have to close this out in the next 2 minutes, Sherry and I wanted to share with you how to get in touch, which you can see on the slide right here, right? LinkedIn. And then she's going to pull up really super quickly, in part as a way to address some of the questions that came up in last week's session around EQ for families, EQ for kids, and so on and so forth. We have, we've created an Eventbrite series, which is, I think, the next slide, Sherry.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Bear with me. Keep talking, Jennifer. I had it. Keep talking.
Yes,
you're doing great.
We have created an